Amateur Traveler is in its 20th year now, but can you imagine if I had people on the show who had never been to the destination, but had just read about it or seen a movie about it? That wouldn't make any sense at all, and you wouldn't listen. We all know how important it is to receive advice from people who know a destination to get the most authentic local experience. And a great option for experiencing this is Explore Worldwide and their authentic small group adventures, led by local tour leaders, perfect for solo travelers who want to meet like minded people with a desire for adventure. I'm often an independent traveler, but two of my last three trips were with small group tours because they organize everything and it's a lot easier. If you want to recreate the tour I did to Malta, they have a Malta and Gozo Discovery Tour. I'm intrigued by one of their tours called A Taste of Sicily. The company again is Explore Worldwide, and visit exploreworldwide.com to learn more. And thanks to Explore Worldwide for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. The nights are long, the days are short, and the weather is chilly to downright cold, depending on where you are. It's a good time to slip into a Quince iconic Mongolian cashmere sweaters, which start at only $50. You can treat yourself to everyday luxury at an affordable price with Quince. If you really want to dive into luxury, you can check out their leather handbags, washable silk shirts, and European linen sheet sets. Whatever you're looking for at Quince, all the prices are 50 to 80% less than similar brands, and they do that by partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the middleman. They only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing processes. And of course, they use premium fabrics and finishes for that luxury feel in every piece. But you've already heard me rave about my Quince travel pants. Treat yourself this winter without the luxury price tag. Go to quince.com/traveler for 365-day returns plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/traveler to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/traveler. And thanks to Quince for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. Amateur Traveler, Episode 110. Today, the Amateur Traveler talks about Puerto Rico. Learn about Chris's tip about where you can go to swim with bioluminescent plankton.
I got my bags packed, I'm on a roll. I'm heading out there, and I'm ready to go. I'm looking real good in my passport photo. Oh no, 15-hour flight, oh, I don't think I'll ever be coming home. You know I love it. Got to see one more cathedral. Got to sit in one more cafe. I know that I should be heading home, but maybe not today.
Welcome to the Amateur Traveler. I'm your host, Chris Christensen. Before we get into the news today, I have one announcement that I want to make that I think everyone will be interested in hearing, and that is that I've made a change so that when I have guests scheduled for interviewing, I'll put information about that and when I'll interview them on the discussion boards at amateurtraveler.com/board. And then if you have specific questions you're looking to get answered, that would be a good place for you to ask them. So pay attention to the discussion boards to get your questions answered. And now on to the news. I have just two news stories for you today, and the first one was from the USA Today, titled, "Will Cell Phones Replace Paper at Airline Check-in Counters?" There's new investigations going on to make it so that you can use your actual cell phone as your ticket for ticketless flying, where there would basically be a barcode that would be on the screen of your cell phone. So that's an interesting article that may change the way we check in for flights in the future. Check that out. And then the second one is from the Travel Mole, and the Travel Mole says, "New resort making splash with hurricane-proof buildings." If you've been holding off your trip to the Caribbean because you're a little afraid of those hurricanes, then you might be interested in the new Resort Conference Center in Key West, which is known not only for its luxury and 24-hour concierge service, but its ability to withstand 205-mile-an-hour hurricane winds. So check out both of those articles on the show notes at amateurtraveler.com. I'd like to welcome to the show Casey, who's come to talk to us about Puerto Rico. Casey, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Chris. Happy to be on your show.
Now, Casey, you've been listening to the show, so you know how we play our game here. Why did you go to Puerto Rico? Let's start with that.
Well, let's see. I've always wanted to go to the Caribbean, and had a few days off over Columbus Day weekend, and I was planning to actually go out your way and head out to California, just spend some time out there since I always like California. But I was looking through Flickr.com at pictures, and I happened to notice a picture out of the side of a plane on a man saying that he was going to San Juan, Puerto Rico, and I said, wow, I've never been to the Caribbean. So I looked up, and American Airlines had a really good fare, and I just decided to book it, and I went.
You know, we've never talked about using Flickr.com as a travel resource, but I've done that myself for the trip that we did this summer. So that's an interesting idea that if you're thinking about going places, especially if you're someone like me, or maybe like Casey, who's visual, then go check out the pictures of different places before you decide where to go. So that's a good travel tip there. I'm surprised we haven't brought that one up yet.
Yeah, I love Flickr. It's just wonderful. Anything you want, and the picture quality is usually very, very, very good, and it's just a great resource and everything like that. So I'm very happy with Flickr.
And while you're there, join the Amateur Traveler group and share your pictures with the rest of the listeners. So, what was your itinerary first in Puerto Rico? How much of the island did you get to see?
Well, my itinerary was basically to fly down on a Friday morning. I had a tight connection in Miami, but ran and made it. And I got down there to San Juan, Puerto Rico. It's a quick 2-hour flight from Miami. It's 1,000 miles from Miami. So you're out there. There's many different Caribbean islands that are closer to the coast of Florida. But I got there Friday afternoon, rented a car, and Puerto Rico is very good to tour by car. We'll probably get to the road situation a little better here in a little bit, but got there on Friday afternoon and was going to tour around on Saturday and Sunday and then take an afternoon flight back on Monday afternoon, Columbus Day.
Okay, and what parts of the island did you get to then?
I got to San Juan, and I went west about 80 miles to Arecibo.
Okay.
And east about 45 minutes to the El Yunque rainforest, which is the gem of the Caribbean as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, well, let's go straight into that, where I think you may have just answered this question. What were the highlights then for you?
Well, the highlight definitely was El Yunque. El Yunque is just a marvelous, marvelous sight to see, and it's very interesting. I've been interested in rainforests since the first grade, and I had the joy of going to Olympics Rainforest in Washington State, August 2006. But of course, Olympic has a completely different rainforest from a Caribbean lush tropical one, and it was very interesting to see the contrasts, especially so close together like that, time-wise.
And what sort of things do you see in the, and I'm going to ask you to say it again,
El Yunque. So it's, the official name is the Caribbean National Forest.
Okay.
And there was an article there, and you'll have to forgive me, I'm not sure if it's Senior or George W. Bush, but one of the Bushes, while in office, apparently to honor the heritage of Puerto Rico, renamed it El Yunque from the Caribbean National Forest.
Okay.
But you go there, it's 45 minutes east of San Juan, very easy car trip, modern road, everything, and you go up and you ascend, and the first stop is a visitor center. You pay $3 to get in per car. It's a wonderful visitor center. It's got some walkways through the trees, and you can talk to guides there, and then from there, you drive up the summit, and you can stop at different waterfalls and different trails. So I stopped at one of the more higher ones that was going to have the greatest waterfall. And that's basically what you do by car. If you're really adventurous, you can drive to the top and you can hike to the top of Mount Britain. Britain with Britten. Okay. And there's lookouts to the Atlantic throughout.
Okay. And I would think being a rainforest, there's also wildlife around too, or is it mostly the views that you were going for?
Mostly the views. In terms of animals, there were not really that I saw. No, there really weren't. There were a few birds, but nothing like what you're thinking, no.
Okay. Anything else we want to say before we go on to your next highlight?
I would just say that no trip to Puerto Rico is complete without El Yunque. You have to go. They've got no excuse. 45 minutes east of the San Juan airport. And people can go for half a day if you're down there for a conference or anything like that, and you get out at 12, just get in the rental car, drive over. It's really quick, and you can do it for as little or as long as you want. Obviously, you can tell that it rains a lot, but the key with the rain is that you would have sudden bursts of rain. So,
Okay.
you would be driving up and you would get a pocket that you could go hiking, and you were really lucky not to have a big storm. But then right when you would get back to your car, it would be, it would start raining. But it's very lush and there's vegetation all around.
Okay. And what's your next highlight?
The next highlight would be, well, let's talk about Plaza Las Americas. I'm someone, when I go to any place, I like to see the infrastructure. I'm involved in the business industry, so I'm very interested to see what kind of business operations are functioning wherever I'm going. And Puerto Rico is home to the largest shopping mall in the Caribbean, and it's called Plaza Las Americas, about 10 minutes south of the San Juan City Center.
Mm-hmm.
It's got the only Macy's in Puerto Rico, and it's got a big cinema and everything. It has humongous waterfalls and everything, and it was really interesting to go there just to see the commerce and industry present in Puerto Rico.
We didn't say that you're a college student. Is your major in business?
Yes, my major is in business.
Okay. Any other highlights?
The Condado Isla Verde area, I'd like to talk a little bit about that. Puerto Rico, when you get into the San Juan metropolitan area, that's where the hub of everything is, there's Old San Juan, then there's Condado, Isla Verde, and then you get out towards the airport area. I stayed in Condado at a nice Radisson Ambassador Hotel. There's a very big casino on the bottom level if you're interested in that, but it was 2 blocks away from the beach. And the Condado area is it makes you feel very much like you're in Miami Beach, just in a more residential area. So
Okay.
if you're less on the main strip in Miami Beach, but more on the residential streets. But a very nice area. I'm a runner, so I took many runs up and down Ashford Avenue, which is the main drag in Condado. So that was very interesting, and there were views of the Atlantic throughout.
I've been to San Juan once, passing through after returning from a barefoot cruise in the Caribbean.
Oh, great.
Anything else about San Juan or Condado?
Just my observations of Old San Juan as a colonial city in comparison to St. Augustine, Savannah, Charleston, and Key West. I didn't take a formal tour like I had in the other places that I mentioned, the Old Town Trolley tours. I didn't do that, but I didn't get the same vibe from it. I just wasn't as interested as I was in switching over to the West, Nado, and forgive me, there's some other areas in San Diego that I'm forgetting that have a colonial emphasis or colonial feel when you're walking through.
Old Town San Diego.
Old Town San Diego, and so I liked it, but it wasn't over souvenir shop or anything like that, so that's nice if you don't like overly commercialized things like that. There were a few very nice restaurants. There were places to get Puerto Rican food, but I wasn't as energized by it as I was by other colonial cities that I've toured.
Now, when you were in Old San Juan, how crowded was it? Because there's quite a lot of cruise ships that dock right there, and it can get extremely crowded.
When I was there, when I drove through the first night, there was a cruise ship docked there. But when I got there the second night that I went, I don't remember if it was Saturday or Sunday night that I was in Old San Juan again, but the ship was not docked there, and you could definitely tell a difference in the number of people that were walking around.
I think when we were there were 4 ships, and one of them wasn't really so much a ship as a floating city. It was one of those size. And did you get to El Morro?
El Morro, the fort? No, I didn't get over there.
Okay.
I just drove around as I was coming in the main boulevard.
And I think for most people, they would tell you that the highlight of Old San Juan is probably El Morro, which is this fort that was only conquered once, and that was by land when the garrison was down with some, I don't remember what the disease was, but they were basically sick is the only reason why it got conquered. So it's this massive fort called the Rock, and it has these towers that hang out over the walls. And so a lot of the pictures, if we go back to Flickr or someplace else for pictures of Old San Juan, you'll see a lot of pictures of El Morro.
Definitely on a future trip, I would definitely try and make it to El Morro.
So, my usual question here, what do the guidebooks recommend that just didn't really work for you?
Well, yeah, that's a very good question for me. Arecibo, I had read some things about it, about the Arecibo Observatory, but more importantly, what made me drive out there was when I landed at San Juan, the airport, they've got a great visitor center right there, and you can pick up a copy of the Que Pasa magazine.
Okay, what's happening?
Yeah, what's happening, exactly. And that's a great magazine that it's kind of like the Where magazines that you get in cities, but it's much better and much more focused on the destination.
Okay.
And it shows a lot of things. And anyways, one of the things that they recommended was they said, oh, drive out to Arecibo. It'll give you a great overview. And I drove out to Arecibo from San Juan, which is about an hour to an hour and 15 minutes west of San Juan.
Mm-hmm.
And you drive out a very modern autopista, is what they call it, a toll road. And they charge you many tolls throughout. But you finally get to Arecibo, and Arecibo is just a very small town. There wasn't really that much there. I decided to drive south of the freeway and south of the town of Arecibo out to the Arecibo Observatory. But when I got there, it was kind of deserted. I got there, and I just wasn't that interested in going up. So I would say that for most people, I'm just not sure if I would want to go there unless I had a very detailed interest in what they were doing up there with telescopes.
And when you say telescopes and observatory, if people don't know Arecibo, I'm sure they have the wrong picture in their head here, because this is a little different than your normal observatory. Do you want to describe?
Yeah, it's not Griffith Observatory.
Yeah, right. Do you want to describe what it looks like?
Actually, I didn't get up to it, so I didn't exactly get up to the main part where the observatory is. I drove down the roads to get up to it, so it's very rural, windy roads to get to it. And it's kind of like at a base of like a summit. You would ascend by foot up to the top, and I didn't get up there to see what kind of views they had there, although I think you were far enough inland that you probably would not have seen the ocean from there.
Okay. And just so people know, Arecibo is actually a valley that has been turned into a radio telescope dish. And if you watch the James Bond movie GoldenEye, you'll see video of the Arecibo Observatory. In that movie, they filled it with water, which is not really the usual state of Arecibo, but that's what they used for the set for that. Okay. So that didn't work as much for you. What did the guidebooks leave out that you stumbled across, either through Que Pasa or through something else?
What I would say the guidebooks left out were, for me, I thought that they left out just the joy of walking up and down Condado a little bit, just, getting a feel for it, and also all the different little shops that they had. They had a very interesting pizza transplanted shop down there. Mike and Charlie's, I believe, is the name, and they were two guys from the States that had come down and just wanted to open up a place in the San Juan area that had good pizza. So maybe some had written about Mike and Charlie's, but I didn't get the positive feel for Condado that I did when I actually got there, of it being just a really cool residential area to walk up mixed with appropriate shops for the scene there. So that's kind of what I would say to that question.
Okay. And was it difficult to get around in Puerto Rico? You talked about the driving and lots of tolls, but other than that?
Well, here's what I would say. The guidebooks were overly cautious about the driving. I mean, they definitely warned you, so kudos to them on that, when you get down there, it's not driving in Miami or Washington. When you drive, most of the roads, the inner city roads around San Juan, I'm talking about the freeways, they're like inner city roads here. So think of, in your home city, think of the inner city road that's probably the one that's the most dangerous, just because very high occupancy, a lot of cars, and a lot of speeders. So just think of that. And you're talking about highways in the San Juan area. But when you get out, it's a totally different scene on the autopistas and on the toll roads. It's much more what you would be used to here in the mainland United States, where people drive a lot better, and it's just you just don't feel like you're cutting your teeth for the first time on the road.
Okay. And Puerto Rican food? Pizza we mentioned. I don't know that that's native to Puerto Rico.
Yeah,
but
not necessarily native Puerto Rican food. I forgot the name of the dish. Forgive me, but they have a banana dish that I tried, and one of the smaller places in San Juan, they sell it, and it's got the banana, and it's garnished by whatever meat you choose, and it's really good. It's a very good Puerto Rican dish.
And the bananas are cooked bananas, I'm assuming.
Yeah, they're the plantains, I believe.
Okay.
And then also, of course, as with any country in this part of the world, beans and rice.
Sure.
One of the places I did not get to that I heard had very high reviews was a place called Metropole. and it has a location in Fajardo, which is east of San Juan, as well as a location, I believe, in the Isla Verde section of San Juan. And I heard really good things about it, and I don't think the prices were that outrageous. I just never got a chance to actually go there. So people
Okay.
who are going to San Juan, you might want to check out Metropole.
Biggest surprise?
I guess I would say the biggest surprise, well, yeah, this is a good question. This is twofold here. First thing would be that I guess I was surprised that the American flag was not flown as much as I was anticipating it to be. Of course, Puerto Rico is a commonwealth and not a state, but it might be a state one day. I just did not feel like I drove around and saw our flag flying as much as I was expecting it to be. I just thought that because it was so closely tied into the United States that the flag would be ever present. The one place I remember seeing it offhand is at the cruise ship terminal, and then of course there were other places you would see it. The other part of that kind of follows into that is the English. People really expected you to speak Spanish or have some level of elementary Spanish, and that's just a good rule of thumb to have anywhere you go. It's always nice to speak to the people in their local language, of course, but I guess I was under the impression that their English and Spanish went hand in hand, and it was truly a Spanish-speaking commonwealth.
Yeah, it is that.
But what was funny, though, is that you would go places and part of a sign would be in English, one part would be in English, one part would be in Spanish, and then the most random things, advertisements on the side of the road, banners, one would be in English, and then on a totally different topic, the next one would be in Spanish. So it was kind of interesting like that.
And what I've read also about Puerto Rico is that they actually, I don't know if it's likely that they're going to become a state. They seem to not want to be independent, but also not necessarily want to be dependent. And there's this kind of interesting middle ground that seems to work for them, at least for most of the population, based on some of the elections that they've had and some of the choices that they've made, that they like being just a little
happy.
They like being Puerto Rico rather than being the 51st state in the U.S.
Exactly, and they seem very, very happy with their situation, and you can tell that there's definitely a sense of pride in their commonwealth, and they're very, very happy about that. And they're very warm people. They're very nice, and I mean, even if you were struggling a little bit with Spanish, might have just middle school and beginning high school Spanish, they were nice about it. So most of the times they were very nice and just very hospitable people.
Okay. Well, is there anything else, Casey, that we want to say as we wrap this up?
Yes, there is some other things. I want to talk about beaches a little bit quickly.
Oh, please.
Here.
Sorry.
Yeah, I would say that for me, I'm a avid beach goer here on the east coast of the United States, from the Jersey Shore on down to the Gold Coast of Florida and West Coast of Florida. I would say that if I wanted a beach vacation myself, I'm very happy staying right here stateside and going to the outer. But there were many beaches down there that were good, but I felt a lot of them were tied into the Westin Resort or the Marriott Resort. Now, they do have blue ribbon beaches, or I believe it's blue ribbon beaches that they call them, and those are ones that are the best in the Commonwealth because they've been certified for water quality and sand quality and things like that.
Okay.
And one of them was in Luquillo, which is east of San Juan on your way to El Yunque. But for some reason, I could not find where I was going to get to this beach, and I was unable to get to it from Route 3. And when you get off the highway, when you get off this big Route 3 highway between San Juan and Fajardo, you should kind of know where you're going. It's just a little desolate getting between the highway and the beach. You don't really know where you are, and there's some just questionable things right there. So you kind of would want to research it before you got off the road a little bit. And I
Questionable
found that
as in you felt not necessarily that safe?
You'd be driving through areas with a lot of shacks, and it would just, it was such a
poor
sharp contrast.
Okay.
Yeah, use the right word, but it was such a sharp contrast to what you saw in the commercialized Puerto Rico that looked like Miami.
Okay.
That's when you really got the sense of being maybe more in a Latin American country or a more poorer country.
And I'm going to suggest a side trip to you if you get down to Puerto Rico again, and that's the island of Vieques, which is just off eastern coast of the island. And one of the highlights that we had from our trip there, and this was actually on that cruise that I mentioned before, was it's one of the places in the world where you can swim with bioluminescent plankton.
Oh, wow.
And so you go out on an electric boat at night, obviously, and you get in the water, and as you stir the water with your hands, it glows. And if you lift your hands out of the water, points of light drip down your arm. So it was just magical. Now, the 3 jellyfish stings that the kids managed to get during that were not so magical, but it still stood out. Even with that, my kids were 2 of the ones that got stung. Even with that, it was probably the highlight of that cruise that we did, was going to Vieques and swimming with the bioluminescent plankton. And Vieques is where there's a lot of controversy, where the Navy has been using that for gunnery practice, but that is scheduled to stop here coming up.
Wow, yeah. They had talked about Vieques, and I think Culebra, is that the other island? I don't know if that's how you pronounce it. But
that sounds familiar.
Yeah, there's another island off of the eastern coast of Puerto Rico that people, that the tourist groups were recommending that people check out. I didn't have the time to do that, so.
Sure, no, yeah. So anything else we want to say as we wrap this up? If I've forgotten anything else obvious.
I will say that people have said the Atlantic side, which is the only side I saw, the north side, they said that side is a lot more rougher than the Caribbean Sea side, which is the southern side. So I think if I ever go back, I'll want to go check out the beaches near Ponce on the southern coast of Puerto Rico, where you would have the Caribbean Sea influence. I'd like to see that.
Okay.
Oh, and also one other thing, radio stations, because I did a lot of driving there while I was there. There are a few English radio stations. I got 3. But what's interesting is most of them come over from St. John and the British Virgin Islands, Tortola and Roadtown. So it was really cool to be driving around Puerto Rico and you were listening to more stuff coming out of St. Thomas and Tortola. So that was kind of nice. And then, of course, there's a whole host of Spanish stations for you there as well.
All right. Well, I want to thank you for coming on the show and telling us a little bit about your trip to Puerto Rico.
Well, thanks, Chris. I love listening to all your podcasts here, and I enjoy downloading them, and I'll look forward to all the future ones as well.
Well, great. Thanks very much.
Safe travels to you, Chris.
In the Internet Resources portion of the show, I have 2 resources for you today. The first one is an article from cruisereviews.com about sailing on smaller ships, since we talked about those really large cruise ships that might be in Puerto Rico. And so it's an article that itemizes some of the cruise lines that have much smaller ships than the floating cities. And the second one goes along with that reference we made earlier to Flickr as a place to store your photos or to look for photos. And it's a series of 132 applications or plugins that let you use Flickr in some particular way. Some of them are games, some of them are ways to upload photos more easily to Flickr, and some just use the Flickr interface to do cool things. So check that out at flickerbits.com, and links to both of those will be in the show notes at amateurtraveler.com. In the community section of the show, I just got, and I mean I really just got, a letter from Jen who had this to say. I just had to share a funny small world story. I listened to your Cinque Terre Milan podcast a few weeks before I went to Italy in September. In Milan, I was walking down the street to my hotel, and when I looked up, I noticed the hotel right across the street was the Hotel Vienna, which you discussed in your podcast. I had to laugh. Of all the places in Milan, ... I love your show. Thanks, Jen. Sasha, who was on the show a while back, wrote me and pointed out that if you tried to vote in the survey, which I put up and I talked about in last week's show, I had the link wrong, so you may have had some difficulty there. So if you're interested, I have corrected that link for last week's show that points to the survey, and I'll put it again in the show notes for this week's show. Gary wrote me a couple weeks ago, and apparently I caused him a little confusion. He was listening to one of his other favorite shows, which is Buzz Out Loud, which is a tech show that I also listen to, and he says, "It's Friday, I'm out taking my daily walk during lunch hour. I'm listening to Buzz Out Loud podcast. But wait, it's Chris the Amateur Traveler. That's my Monday morning drive to work podcast. Did I miss the weekend? Thank goodness I live in a virtual world where I can go back in time and catch up on things. Now, if only there were some way to get the Cubs into the playoffs. Hope you enjoyed the podcaster show." And I did very much, Gary, but I can offer no hope with the Cubs, so sorry. And unfortunately, neither can I offer hope for the Giants these days. And what Gary is referring to is, I listen to a lot of different podcasts. Actually, I think I subscribe to about 90 different podcasts. And where possible, if I think of something that I think can offer value to the podcast, I will submit it. And so I had submitted a humorous bit to the Buzz Out Loud podcast. And I would like to encourage you to do the same. And there are many ways that you can contribute to this podcast. If you'd like to send me voice feedback, call the comment line at 408-8494-POD. Or send me an email at host@amateurtraveler.com. Go to the discussion boards. Remember, you can ask questions of our next guests on the discussion boards or comment at amateurtraveler.com. And as always, thanks so much for listening.
I got to see one more cathedral. I got to sit in one more cafe. I know that I should be heading home, but maybe not today.
The best and the brightest, served up daily by the sharpest minds in content delivery, Pod Show and Limelight.